Once a month, we like to discuss all things gardening with Jackson County Master Gardener Lynn Kuntzman. Today, she shares spring gardening tips with host Jeff Riley.
Lynn Kuntzman, thanks for joining us once again on the Jefferson Exchange.
Hi, nice to be here.
Now, I know we're in March, so it is the month of spring arriving, but certainly not in the first part of the month with snowstorms seeming to come one on top of the other. So, I mean, is it premature? We shouldn't be doing anything outside at this point, right?
No, I mean, there really isn't anything to do when the ground is frozen solid. But it certainly can be if you've got a greenhouse or a window garden, where you're starting your vegetable seeds for your spring garden. That can be going on. If you want to plant, say in mid-March or late March, some of those cole crops or other things, refer again to the garden guide that Master Gardeners has for the Valley to tell you what you can be planting out as transplants and starting from seed to create transplants. There are some things you can direct seed, but they're going to grow very slowly when we're getting these freezing temperatures.
Right. I was reading about some seeds will just basically not germinate; they'll stay dormant, or will they ever germinate?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The old rule of thumb is plant peas on President's Day. Well, we're well past President's Day now, and my guess is if people planted peas this last President's Day, those peas are still sitting in the ground just waiting for the soil temperatures to be correct for them to come up. And so that the seeds know when the appropriate moment is, better than we do. And the reason we start them indoors, of course, is to trick them into thinking it's later in the season than it really is. And then we can tuck them into the garden, and we'll have a 3 or 4 week jump on the season that way. That's the reason for starting transplants early.
All right. When you move transplants outside, how much of a shock factor is there if the soil is still relatively cold?
Yeah, it's the same thing. If you've got a good layer of like leaf mulch on the soil, you might not get this, especially now this time of year, now that we're past some of the very coldest weather. It might not even be freezing down in the garden bed, because if you've got 2 or 3 inches of leaf litter protecting that soil layer, you might find that your garden beds are less frozen than just open soil in your yard. So it's one of the reasons we tell people to, protect your garden beds in winter, put the leaves on and let them do their thing over the winter. It helps keep the soil from freezing completely.
Okay, well, that produced a grimace on my face because I was thinking, what the heck, And you can't dry the soil out over the winter, right? So what's the point of putting mulch on it? Forgetting everything you told me in the past.
Right. It's not a matter of drying the soil out or, worrying about that. In the winter, putting a layer of mulch or a green cover crop on provides. Sorry, my dogs are going nuts in the background because my husband just drove in.
Can barely hear.
They're just screaming their heads off. The shrieking eels. Anyway, you can by putting that protective layer of leaves on in the winter, you are providing habitat for overwintering insects, and they are decomposing those leaves. And then a 3-inch layer of leaves is going to keep the frost in abeyance. So it's going to keep the ground from freezing solid. So that's another reason for leaving a mulch on garden beds.
Okay. Well, that moves me into the next realm, though, which is when do you add soil amendments? I mean, when do you start putting things out there to enhance what you've got under that mulch?
Sure. So generally, we tell people if you're going to be fertilizing, put the fertilizer in when you plant the plant. You're digging a hole to put the plant in, or you're digging a furrow to plant the seeds in. Put the fertilizer in the bottom of that planting basin that you've made, and scratch it around a little bit, and that should be, then you're good to go. And then during the season, as the plants are growing, particularly summer vegetables that tend to be heavier feeders than the spring vegetables, You can side dress with compost or use liquid fertilizer if you feel like they really need a boost. An organic liquid fertilizer to get the root area drenched and provided with some nutrition.
Side dress, once again, though, you're not bombing the plant with it. You're putting it next to the plant. It's adjacent, just not on.
It right. Yeah. So side dressing just means you're putting compost at the base of the plant, around close to the stem, where you're going to be watering, and the nutrients from that compost will water down, or the insect life there in the soil will pull those nutrients down as it burrows and fidgets around down there.
Lynn Kunzman is back with us on the Jefferson Exchange for another edition of Garden for Life. We did record this in advance, but if you'd like to get in on a future conversation on Garden for Life, send a question or a story along to jx@jeffnet.org. So as long as we're talking about soil amendments and the kinds of things that you can put in to enhance your garden, fertilizer, stuff like that, can you overdo it? I mean, can you just put too much that you just, I'm loving my plants and you love them to death?
Right. Absolutely. And in fact, home gardeners are notorious for over-fertilizing, especially their vegetable gardens, but over-fertilizing everything, lawns, perennial beds, everything, because they feel like, I've got to fertilize every time. And no, we probably don't. I mean, the soil, if you've got good, healthy soil that has a high clay content, like it's a loamy soil or it's a sandy loam or a clay loam, that soil itself is holding on to those nutrients, and the exchange with the plant roots is happening, from those clay micelles into the plant roots or into the mycelium, the mycorrhizal fungi that are in the soil that then pass it on to the plant. And so really a lot of the fertilizing that gardeners do ends up passing through the soil system and getting into streams and causing problems there. So better to, when we tell people to apply, when we fertilize, we tell people do it weekly, do half strength fertilization.
One of my favorite phrases from you, weekly.
Weekly, right. If you're doing a liquid fertilizer, weekly. And then you're not applying too much at a time that it's going to go racing down, and be carried out to other environments.
Which is a big concern because, I mean, for the people concerned about agricultural runoff, don't be creating it yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah, we tend to get holier than thou, and in fact, in many cases, agricultural systems are doing it better than we home gardeners are because they are very controlled. Their bottom line is they don't want to be over applying fertilizers because it's expensive for them to do so, and so and they're trained in how to do it. And, many home gardeners are not. They just go out there and spray or fertilize at will. And there are more problems with home garden over applications of all kinds of things.
Okay. And we should point out that when we say weekly, we're doing weekly in both senses, like as in not strong and once a week. So that's
half strength every week. And so, if the label says apply every 2 weeks at this strength, we say, no, better to make it half strength and just do it double the amount of time. So you're doing it more often, but at a lesser strength. So if it's an application that's, once a month, you then do it twice a month at half strength. And that's a better way to keep those nutrients on your property and doing the work that you want them to do for your plants.
Lynn Kunzman is back with us on the Jefferson Exchange on Garden for Life. We are talking about gardening issues relevant to the month of March. If you would like to have some conversation with us in the April edition, send an email to jx@jeffnet.org. While we're talking about fertilizers, I noticed that I was out checking in the garden on one of the snowy days in late February, and there were some deer nuggets out there, and I got me thinking again about the kinds of manures that are okay to use in gardens, particularly food gardens, and the kind that are specifically not.
Sure. Well, you're not going to use dog manure. That's not something. But almost any kind of agricultural manure, anything like, rabbit, goat, those kinds of things, if they're mixed with bedding, are pretty mild and can be used. I usually recommend people compost their manures in with their compost pile just to get it broken down. Horse and steer manure or cow manure, it needs to be kind of mixed into the compost pile and allowed to break down before you don't apply it directly.
So not full strength, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not full strength. You can certainly use those things to make like a manure tea, and put them in water in a big barrel or something, and then let them steep, and then use that as a fertilizer. That's fine. You probably are not going to be able to make a manure tea that is too strong to put on your garden.
Sorry, I can't help giggling about manure tea.
Right, manure tea, right. And then when the barrel's empty and you've got detritus down the bottom, dump that into the compost pile and let it do its thing. It becomes part of your compost regime. The one real thing that you need to worry about is chicken manure. It is very, very hot, even mixed with bedding. You can really burn plants with that, and so that really does need to be composted. Because it's just so high in nitrogen and it can scorch plants.
Is there a lot of ammonia in it or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very high in urea, ammonia compounds. Yeah.
Okay. As far as if I get more deer nuggets in the garden, and obviously I have to put the fencing in place, is it okay to leave that there? Does that help at all? Or is
yeah, they're not going to hurt at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to hurt. And I used to rear rabbits, and I would take the rabbit compost mixed with the bedding that went through the bottom of the cage, and I just put that out on my garden beds. It was pretty mild, and it breaks down really readily, and it was never a problem. But in most instances, you want to compost your manure product.
Okay. Let's shift indoors because obviously we're still doing some work in there. And any suggestions on how to keep a relatively contained growing area if you don't have a lot of room in your house and you're trying not to make a huge mess?
Yeah. So I don't know. We've got a greenhouse. So we have a little greenhouse here that we use. And, of course, I've got the big ones out at the SOREC campus. And so it's less of an issue about making a mess. Inside, the problem is space. I mean, not many people have enough window space inside to put a big shelf up under every window in their house and grow stuff that way. There are kind of cool commercial racks that you can get that have light systems in them so that if you want to grow several trays of stuff at a time, you're growing them vertically and with grow lights so that the plants are getting enough light. That's always the issue indoors, is having the plants get enough light and heat. But if you're doing that, you want to be very, very certain that you have a tray liner that is solid on the bottom. And you're going to have to be careful not to overwater that because obviously if it's a solid bottom tray liner, it's not going to let water go down onto the lights on the next shelf, but it's also going to retain water in there, and then you can drown your seedlings. So it's a very touchy kind of balancing act. You have to take the trays off, water the plants, and let them drain somewhere where you don't mind the water draining away, and then put them back in that waterproof liner so that you're not going to electrocute yourself.
Okay, good plan. There's about 30 seconds left, Lynn. You got a couple of events you want to talk about coming up later in the spring?
Right. April 22nd at the Industrial Stores site in Phoenix from 11 to 2. There's a Bee City event we'll have a booth at. And May 6th at the SOREC campus in Central Point is our Spring Garden Fair. It's just one day, and it's from 9 o'clock until 3 p.m., 9 in the morning, 3 p.m. So, yeah, everybody will be telling you more about that shortly.
All right. We'll talk about it certainly on the next edition of Garden for Life as well with our resident Master Gardener, Lynn Kunzman from Jackson County Master Gardeners. Lynn, always a pleasure.
Really fun. Thanks. Bye.